What a time this is. I have had to pull myself back from living in a constant state of fight or flight. How about you? Fight or flight is meant to be a temporary state, a brilliant way to protect ourselves from that proverbial tiger. But that should be like a very small portion of our lives. If we find ourselves stuck in fight or flight, what's the alternative? What does the ideal state look like?
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday? So I call you up and you call me down. Would it be okay?
Well, hello again and welcome to the FreedHearts podcast, episode 22. My name is Robert Cottrell and I'm here as always with
Susan Cottrell.
Hi there.
Hi there.
It's good to be back with you.
I'm glad to be here too. Right into the mic.
What a time it has been. Does anyone else feel like that right now? That's what we're going to talk about today. What a time. We're kind of wondering what's next in the world. It's been unusual, yeah? You know, I've had to pull myself back, including in this very moment. And actually today, most of this day, I've had to pull myself back from fight or flight. The constant energy of fight or flight. How about you?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, fight or flight is meant to be an automatic protection, our brilliant way to protect us from that proverbial tiger.
It's always a tiger.
It's always a tiger. So we can either fight or run to save our lives. But that should be like a small portion of the time we can't live there. And 99% of the time, we're not even being threatened by a real tiger.
Yeah.
But we live there so much. I find myself living there all the time, it seems.
Yeah.
And that's no way to live, no place to live. So what's the alternative? That's what we want to talk about today, is what's the alternative to fight or flight? What's the ideal state that is not fight or flight?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
You know, I asked you that the other day because I was curious if you knew, and you said surrender and stay, which I thought was wonderful.
I am just brilliant.
You are brilliant. And I thought, oh, that sounds really nice. And to be clear, surrender doesn't mean you surrender to abuse or to someone who wants your compliance. That's not what we mean, but to surrender to the situation in front of you, to be present to it, and to let the next step emerge. So I thought that was a great answer.
Yeah, well, thanks, honey.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
That was not what I found when I looked up the alternative. It was not what I was seeking. So I'm going to tell you what I was seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
What I found as I looked up the alternative to fight or flight was rest and digest.
That's pretty good too.
Have you ever heard that?
No.
Well, let's see. I learned it just a couple of years ago. And it seems that we all know fight or flight, but we don't know rest and digest. And I think just that those words don't spring to our lips so easily, that in itself seems to be a commentary on our lives, doesn't it?
Yeah. It seems fight or flight has become such common phrase in the language because it's so familiar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And especially we lived there before 2020 a lot of the time, just because that's the pace in which the world seems to operate right now. But then we just cranked everything up over the past year or so. And now it's for a lot of us, it's a way of life. Yeah.
And the news fatigue, what was it called? News fatigue. Oh, doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling.
Yeah. That's just fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight as a constant feed. And we rarely really take the time to rest and digest.
Well, and when you're in fight or flight all the time, then you're either operating with fists clenched, ready to defend yourself, or ready to fight, or find yourself debating and arguing and
jaws clenched.
Yeah, jaws clenched, or you're on the run, or wondering if you should pack to be on the run, to do flight.
Yes.
It's constant stress.
Constant.
And there's no rest. and there's no time to digest anything.
Yeah. And so the rest and digest speaks to this Zen-like state of peace, to rest from our work, to rest from our thoughts, and to digest what we're internalizing from the world. You know, it speaks to healing and recovery from overwork, from shock, from trauma. Like a deer that shakes after it's gotten away from the lion. You know how that we always talk about that. And it's always a deer, right? But actually, I think I read that all animals do that automatic expulsion of trauma, except for humans. We don't do that. But we need that healing and recovery time from, I don't know, say a worldwide pandemic and a breakdown in our economic system and all the other problems that our worldwide pandemic has shown us so clearly.
Do you think it's gotten harder, gotten more difficult to do this?
The rest and digest?
Yeah.
Well, I think this year has been a halt in business as usual to a large degree. I hope so. And I hope that things will move forward with more contemplation than they have before. And, you know, a lot of people we know have been saying, we don't want it to get back to business as usual, because business as usual is what led us to this breakdown of our systems. So I think the invitation of 2020 was to reassess and, you know, recreate from the ground up. But I don't know if we'll do that. But the doom scrolling and the trauma has increased a millionfold. And for people who fell through the system and people who lost family members to COVID, it's been an increased fight or flight.
Yeah, I think that, you know, if the opposite is rest and digest, I think, well, what's preventing me from resting? You know, again, those the clenched jaw and everything else, that would certainly not be conducive to a restful mindset. But I think, and I've joked with you that, you know, the things that I tended to do to kind of get out of the house and step away from work would be go to a movie or sit in a Starbucks or go walk at a market or something like that. I've not been able to do any of that over the past year. So our ability, either because of our circumstances or health or being stuck at home or whatever, our ability to rest has been limited because we are forced to sometimes rest in the same exact setting physically that we fight or do flight because we're just here.
Yes.
And so I think that's harder. I also think digesting is really harder because, and we've noticed the change with the 24-hour news cycle and how it's all about the clicks and everything else. And everybody wants you to click and read whatever their headline they've tossed up there. So it's been increasingly more difficult to take the time to digest things going on. But when the headline pops up that there's this new variant of the virus, or this is going on, or this is going on in Washington, or this, it's like we're so overwhelmed by that it's difficult to take the time to just digest what's real, what's fear, what's a guess, what do I need to know, what don't I need to know. And so both those things I think are really difficult.
And it's like an intention to keep us in fight or flight. It's like an undercurrent to keep us in fight or flight.
That's scary right there.
That's scary right there.
Yeah.
So, and I also wanted to talk about another alternative that I discovered just like last week to fight or flight, to rest and digest. And that is tend and befriend. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
This speaks to attending our friendships, our little ones, our systems that we realize we were broken in, say, a worldwide pandemic, to tend to our children and our families, to befriend others in the community, to build cooperation. I mean, that makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's also very active, which I
It's
think is
very
really
active.
important. Yeah,
Yeah. So
I like that.
as I was looking at these two things, I was seeing rest and digest as sort of self-care and tend and befriend as care in the community.
Other care, yeah.
Isn't that
Wow.
interesting?
That's really good.
Yeah. Now, there's one more piece that I think is really interesting about this, and that's with tend and befriend. The article that I read said it tends to occur along gender lines. That is, that women are more inclined to tend and befriend, while men are more inclined to fight or flight.
Hey, Jim's fighting words. See?
I know.
I'm out of here. See?
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And it's really not surprising. Now, I'm not going to say if it's nature or nurture. I don't know that.
It's a different episode.
But that's a different episode that we won't have the answers to. So, but we can clearly see that in our hyper masculinized culture that we do live in, we're all predisposed toward fight or flight.
Yeah.
And we really have to all people, all genders have to work at both rest and digest and tend and befriend.
Well, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. Certainly, as a man, there's we are Western, especially Western culture. Men were trained to be more natural fight or flight when we can't fight, or don't want to fight. But the idea of rest, digest, tend, befriend, I think Alan Alda and MASH. You know what I mean? We're just not, most of us are not trained that way. So it's
definitely not trained that way.
So it's that kind of operating in a state that's not that is ingrained in us as not masculine, not right. And that gender, that binary of gender thinking that is sad. And it's,
And I was saying that I don't know if it's nature or nurture, and that's another episode, but an answer just occurred to me that really makes sense. And that I think that there may be some nature in it. There may be some more fight or flight, predisposition in males than females, and tend and befriend in females. However, I think what may be inborn, and I don't know if it is, but if it is nature, then it's much smaller amount than has been exacerbated in our culture, which has nurtured this differential in a big way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, if there's a small amount in the nature, well, the culture has just nurtured that to its full bloom.
Yeah, and I mean nurture in the worst way, like in the negative way that, where men are really pushed into fight or flight. And women too, really, but men especially. It's a hyper masculinized culture that we're in.
We saw this in this gender difference clearly I worked for 10 years with kids with cancer. And this was a really common occurrence in so many families. Yeah. In a tragic number of families, as soon as that cancer diagnosis came down for the child, the dad was gone.
Yes.
He couldn't take it, wouldn't take it. And it was as if suddenly he was faced with this thing that he couldn't overcome. His child's cancer. He couldn't beat it, couldn't explain it, didn't know how to handle it. No matter how hard he would try to fight, it was not guaranteed. And there was no control in that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No control in that. So he left.
Yes.
He abandoned his wife and his children when they could have used him the most. Yeah. And when his presence would have been the most valuable. And that's where fight or flight can take you. If it's like, it's like if you're overwhelmed by fear and you can't cope, either you find, if you're defaulting everything to fight, then for me at least, you find that I'm always pissed off and I'm argumentative and I'm responding and I'm just always fighting and always debating or I've had it and I'm out of here.
Yeah. And it's interesting because fight or flight makes you stupid. And so these men, these dads, they don't say this is a really hard time and my family could use me the most right now, but I can't cope. It doesn't make you say that. You say, I can't fix this the way I want, so I'm out of here.
Well, fight or flight in the wrong way makes you stupid.
Right.
I mean, right.
Yeah, to get away from a lion,
valuable. Right.
Or a tiger in the needed circumstance, it's very valuable. But overused, but it literally makes you stupid because your brain, all the blood rushes to your primitive cortex for you to. Case in point.
Hey.
For you to be able to deal with what you need to deal with. And so your higher level thinking is shut off while you're doing that. So it does make you stupid, literally.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, but the mothers in those situations were always there.
Always.
Every family we dealt with, here she is, dealing with this child and going through chemo and hospital and parking the hospital and relatives and all of this stuff. And she's dealing with it now by herself. And not a one of our moms left.
Yeah.
That's kind of a testimony to the place women hold in this culture. And
their strength.
And the strength. And she shouldn't have to carry that weight by herself, but very many women in our culture do.
And again, the gender difference, but also if you talk nature, nurture there, it's not, it's more balanced because the mother has the ability to rest and digest and to tend and to befriend, while at the same time, when called upon, be strong.
Yeah. There is, okay, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. There's incredible strength in the tend and befriend and in the rest and digest. That's incredibly strong as opposed to, I thought I was hearing you say.
No, it's more relational.
Yeah.
No, it's more relational. But they can fight.
Power, but the fighting, and they certainly fought for their child. And that was, it was fight or flight in fighting for their child, So
I just admire it was a statement of admiration that I was trying to make.
Sorry,
there. No. In that men seem to be much more tied to the binary thinking of gender sometimes, be it nature or nurture or combination. And so it's like, well, I'm going to fight or I'm out of here and I can't do anything else. Where women, moms are, I can do the relationship stuff, but if called upon,
don't touch my child because I'll come at you. Yeah.
To be, strong at a time when they need to be strong, they're there.
Yes.
And I love that.
I love that
about
too.
you and about so many women. Yeah.
Our hearts go out.
Yeah.
And again, you kind of said it like a binary, like the male and female. There's a lot. It's magnified because of the culture.
Yeah.
Having, required that of men and women.
Yeah, but fight or flight is a survival mode. It's how we survive when we're attacked. But it's not someplace you want to stay because it's not a growth mode. Yeah. Fight or flight is not nurture our society to health and well-being mode. It's to, when used, it's to keep your populace afraid mode.
Tell us what you mean.
Well, just imagine if you were trying to control a group of people, even to the point where you were promoting false teaching, or at least not totally honest teaching.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you would want from that group is to have them rest and digest what you were saying.
Yes.
To tend and befriend each other and become close. You want them to be dependent.
That's brilliant.
You want them to be controlled. And so to keep them in fight or flight keeps them afraid. And so many politicians, and for their own self-interest news outlets just because they've fallen prey to ratings and clicks and views and audience numbers.
It's a business.
Religious teachings.
Yeah.
Even families and family dynamics are all about fight or flight. It's a very, very effective way to keep people afraid and dependent and scrambling for survival.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you're being taught in any way, that you should be afraid that bad things are going to happen to you, that you've got to fight your orientation or your way of being or whatever it is that they don't like, that's the wrong mode. All right? Was that clear there?
Yes.
What I said?
I mean, to me, it is.
So if you're being taught or being led in a way where you should be afraid that bad things are going to happen to you, and you've got to fight your orientation or your way of being or whatever it is that someone, the group, doesn't like, that's the wrong mode. And if you're being taught that if you don't fight successfully, then you're subject to flight, which in this case means forced flight, being kicked out of a community or kicked out by God. Hear me now. That's a lie. It's wrong teaching. That's fight or flight.
Let me pause in here that we have to remember that news media, religious institutions, and even politics, as so many like politicians have become career politicians, these are businesses. These are money-making ventures. And so there's always a vested interest in keeping people in your thrall.
Yeah, and some of it, I mean, let's give some people the benefit of the doubt here. It doesn't make it any less dangerous, but some people know exactly what's going on and they do it on purpose. Some have just, like I said, have fallen into, well, hey, we get ranked by our views and we stay on the air by our audience, and so we have to do this. And some politicians, I think of U.S. Congress, every 2 years they're up for election. The moment they get sworn in, they're immediately campaigning for re-election.
Right.
And so but then there are others in the church and in politics and in news that are intentionally doing this, more so than we would want to think, that are intentionally doing this, knowing that they're keeping us on the edge of our seats, ready to pounce, afraid that we're going to be pounced on, or afraid that this is just not all going to work out and we're going to be out of here, either by choice or by force.
Right. And certainly there are a lot of people in those positions whose heart is totally in the right place, that they're just not the ones we're talking about right
now.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And that's a threat. And that's a threat. So the idea behind this episode was because I think for me, at least, this is really powerful. And I didn't know, as we sometimes usually talk about our episodes, but this is one that you said, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to say or to talk about it because I want you to be surprised as well. And this rest and digest and tend and befriend are things that I need, because I find myself, and I know I'm not alone out there, folks, I find myself living in fight or flight. And I don't want to be that. I don't want that for you. And
we wake up sometimes in fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yes.
Go to bed and wake up in fight or flight.
And I can't seem to get out of it. So the goal of this episode was to give you some alternatives to begin to remember when you find yourself in that mode of fight or flight, to remember, rest and digest, tend and befriend. And any faith community or any view of God that's worth anything, let alone the devotion of your heart, will focus on rest and digest, tend and befriend, not on fight or flight. Any politician that's worth having in office is going to focus on rest and digest, tend and befriend, not fight or flight. Any relationships, including family members that are worth our time and attention, seriously, are going to focus on rest and digest, tend and befriend, not fight or flight. We hear all the time, I don't want the drama. I don't want the drama. I'm so tired of the drama. Well, fight or flight is the drama. It's what gives you the drama.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. What we want this to be is we hope that the outcome of this episode, it is for me, and I hope it is for you, that fight or flight, that anxiety that we feel becomes a red flag. And not just in our daily lives, but as we look at our faith, our churches, our community, our online community, our family and friend, the groups that we're in on Facebook, the politicians that we support, everything, fight or flight is not a sound basis for religion, for politics, for life. It's really only a basis for keeping people in check. Again, it's valuable when the lion comes, when the tiger comes, which is...
Lion or tiger, it's good.
Or bears.
Or either one. Or bear. Oh, my. We're so funny. We entertain ourselves. Of course I got that.
I don't know if you're laughing out there, but we love this. No one needs to listen. We just listen.
I hope it's not just us.
No, I hope it's not just us. By the way, since we hope it's not just us, email us at podcast@freedhearts.org. Podcast@freedhearts.org. And let us know your comments, your questions, things you want us to talk about. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
So fight or flight is valuable when the threat is real, but it's not a sound basis for religion or family dynamics or politics. It's only a basis for keeping people in check, for controlling them, and honestly, bringing in money.
Yeah.
Fear brings in money. A common enemy or an enemy brings in money. Threats bring in money. Richard Rohr talks about this. He said the most conservative, rules-based religions intentionally keep people off their game, keep them immature in their own abilities, to keep them dependent.
Yes.
That's fight or flight. So we want you to fight or flight when needed, when attacked, when the threat is real. But for your life, for your relationships, for your faith, for your spirituality, for your family, we want you to rest and digest. And we want you to tend and befriend. That's what we want for you, because you're free. Your hearts are free. You are beloved. Please don't ever forget that.
Yeah.
We love you.
We love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday, so I call you up and you call me down? Would it be okay?
You've been listening to the Freed Hearts Podcast. We have extensive resources and vibrant community for you at www.freedhearts.org. Just come say hello. And if you have questions or issues or comments about the podcast, things you'd like us to talk about, reach out to us at podcast@freedhearts.org. The music is provided by Hannah Cottrell, our daughter, the Grammy-nominated Saint Sinner, and you can find out more about her at heysaintsinner.com. Please share this, subscribe, and follow on your favorite platform, and thanks for listening.